This has been a thing that mechanics have been screaming about for 15 to 20 years. And you can go through the logs on a daily basis and see, all the things that get reported to the FAA, and it's a lot. They have the resources to get away with anything.
They find you in a hotel parking lot in your trunk.
In his trunk?
In his trunk.
He had, some seriously damning knowledge that could change the course of, whether or not they took things.
So with Boeing, there's planes falling apart, wheels falling off, panels falling off. There's engine failure. They have to reroute and do emergency landings, and it's a whole mess right now. So there's a whistleblower, and he has been working for Boeing for about 25, 30 years plus. He retires in 2017. And then he starts making claims that Boeing is cutting corners. It's very unsafe. They're doing a lot of illegal, procedures. So John was blowing the whistle. He was in the middle of a deposition with them. And turns out that he gets offed, allegedly.
So this has been a thing that's come up in the maintenance industry. So currently right now I work at a 145 repair station. So that's a FAA certified repair station. And that's certified to do minor and major alterations to airframe and engines. Now, for those certificates, they're pretty specific. When it comes to the airlines, though, they're even more specific. And it's a real... So, the biggest money that in payroll that the airlines pump out is for inspectors and quality control. It actually happens to be the one place where, had they not done a bunch of cutbacks of layoffs and, restructuring of the companies, some of these incidences would not have occurred. And it all comes down to how good is your QA department. And especially, Boeing has a tough time because, their airplanes are big, which means that, to produce them, that's a real big footprint that takes up. You're talking about acres and acres and acres of, space. And those airplanes aren't all assembled in one area.
Right.
Parts of it are built here, parts of it are built there, parts of it built there, and it comes together as a chain. Well, you figure if one section's quality control is great, the other section's quality control is not so great, but still passable, it leads to events, like we're seeing with doors flying off and wheels flying off. And that's just the stuff that they're telling us. I mean, we here in the maintenance industry, we hear every single day. We can get online and we can look, of the things that are reported, where parts are reported as being counterfeit, because that's a real big issue that we have now with the advent of 3D printing and the advent of, digitizing all records and digitizing all, documents. Now, any, Joe Blow can go to the National Archives and say, hey, I need this particular part. It's this number. It has this serial number. And they can send you a drawing to it. They can manufacture it, produce it, stamp it with the date, make all the paperwork right. You're none the wiser.
Right.
So,
and what's the problem with that if it's done by like a 3D printer or something?
Well, so, would you take, okay. So, for instance, we found bell cranks that were it was on an airplane that was a certified airplane, which meant that it had a type certificate, it had gone through all the testing, it had gone through the manufacturing process. Well, what the owner decided that he wanted to do is he wanted to make the airplane experimental, which, your airplane, you own it, you can do that. It just means that, there's not the quality standard. So what he did is he bought what he thought were heavier duty blocks for his wings, which are what the wing attaches to. It's a solid structure.
Right.
Was stamped with the manufacturer thing. He bought it from eBay. He got the paperwork. We started looking at the paperwork and we're like, whoa, there's a bunch of typos in this paperwork. So then we've seen that the certificate number, and I was like, well, that certificate number isn't quite long enough. Come to find out, there was some Joe Schmo that, had 3D printed or done it on a lathe, whatever. He manufactured the part, but it's a counterfeit part. Now, experimental airplane doesn't really mean very much. You know, you can go on, but as this guy found out, he put it on, you know, flew it a couple of times. I guess because it's not the same material, the weights were different. You know, he did damage to his airplane. You know,
Okay.
and so
that means that you're getting something that says it's certified up to the standards that it should be, when in fact it's not necessarily up to those standards.
Yeah, so, you know, you see this all the time in especially avionics, which is the radio systems in airplanes. And avionics covers a lot more than just the radios. It covers pretty much all the electrical systems, the indication systems, you know, sometimes de-icing systems if there's de-icing indication or ice indication. But so you see it a lot with switches. You know, you have a toggle switch, just like any of the ones you can see behind me here on the panel, right? In theory, they have a certain, you know, bunch of standards that they go up to, right? That comes on a tag that says, okay, this is a certified part. But you can go to Radio Shack when Radio Shack was still a thing back in the day and get the exact same switch. Now, that switch coming from Beechcraft or Textron or Cirrus or Boeing, you know, that switch might, when you buy it from the manufacturer, cost $700, $800. But it might only be a $10, $15 switch. The only difference is that stamp that says FAA PMA, which is Federal Aviation Administration Professional Maintenance Association. So that's the guys who govern all the certifications on, you know, parts. They hold, you know, all the data sheets so you can tell if parts are counterfeit, which the airlines have that happen all the time. You know,
So I'm still not understanding. If it's the same switch, what does it matter if one has a little certification number and one doesn't? Are you saying that the quality of the switch is actually different?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that that company, whoever's manufacturing that FAA PMA part, has gone through the rigorous testing and paid the entrance fee to say that's an FAA PMA part. Now, by regulations, I cannot put a non-FAA PMA part on a certified airframe unless there's a supplemental type certificate, or what's called a STC for it, which means that the manufacturer's gone ahead and done the testing. The manufacturer says it's okay. They've applied for the STC certificate, and then you can buy that STC certificate. You see that a lot with like lighting systems when, you know, older airplanes go from the incandescents to LEDs. Well, the way for them to do that is, you just can't go and say, oh, well, I want to get a new landing light for my airplane, you know, and just go and buy whatever landing light. You have to buy the landing light that's either came with the airplane or that fits underneath an STC. So if you want to get LEDs, you can get LEDs. If you want to, you know, if you want to get a super bright light, you know, as long as it's certified and it's on the STC, the manufacturer says that it's okay and it can be signed off as a certified airplane.
Okay. So what do you think, like, what are the types of things that were happening at Boeing that you think are an issue?
So after COVID, the airlines had a huge revenue problem. You know, I mean, nobody was flying. So they were taking airplanes out of service, which means they were taking pilots out of service, which means if they were taking pilots out of service, chances are they're taking mechanics out of service. And now here's the thing about the airlines too. The airlines have hiring contracts with most aviation maintenance schools. And I'm going to tell you, as a student of those aviation maintenance schools,
most of those aviation maintenance schools, all they're teaching you is how to fill out the paperwork and take the test.
Right.
You know, I mean, a lot of those kids, I never touched an engine until I walked into the shop. And luckily, I was working at a shop that was a repair station that sponsored me to go to school, because it's just an easier option that way. Because it's like 2,000 hours that you have to do in the shop for you to be an apprentice, for you to get certified and signed off to take the test. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. But what the airlines do is they'll take a guy, you know, fresh out of school, fresh out of his test, you know, yeah, he might know the basic knowledge, but he doesn't have his hands on an airplane. He doesn't know, anything. He's just going to take what, his trainer tells him on his first day of work. And his trainer's probably going to be a guy with about 5 years experience who's been sitting with a can of brake clean and a rag, doing wheels and brakes for 5 years, and then they'll move them up. It's a very big, there's like a seniority thing that happens in, airline maintenance. And it's totally different than general aviation, which is what I'm in, is general aviation. We're general aviation like commercial.
Okay. So what are you saying? They're hiring these kids that have no experience?
Oh yeah, that's what it is. They're hiring guys that have no experience. They're making, so in the airlines. See, this is the other thing too. The airlines, because of their certificates, they can make anybody an inspector, anyone. So as long as you're employed by that company and in that shop as a resource, if somebody likes you and says, "Hey, I believe that you have what it takes to be an inspector," okay, cool. We promote you from within, and now we make you an inspector on our repair station.
So now you're inspecting stuff, saying, "Oh, it passed inspection," but you don't really have any experience at all.
You don't have, the FAA doesn't hold, you don't hold any certifications. I mean, those guys don't even have to be airframe and power plant mechanics for them to be mechanics in the actual shop. I mean, that's kind of the way that I get away with doing, the work that I do, because I work directly underneath somebody that has an IA, but they coincidentally own the repair station too.
Right.
And that happens all over the country. I mean, the airlines do it. The airlines will hire a guy that has, plenty of experience, but he failed the test and he can't retest for another 2 years or 90 days or, whatever the time, requirement is. And there's different time requirements for different failures. And so they'll take a guy that failed and they'll say, all right, well, go and work in the shop and we'll make you A, B, and C because you have this amount of experience or you scored this on your tests in school. Practical knowledge, they have none. You see that with pilots too nowadays. The flight training industry is even worse with it. They're pumping out pilots. I worked at a flight school that had a 90-day 0 to hero. So you go from in 90 days, you go from knowing nothing about an airplane to having a full pilot's license. How good do you think the training is?
Right.
They're just pumping out the certificate because the FAA is still 6 years behind in paperwork. Everything's still done on, regular hard cards and regular, regular pieces of paper that you got to scan through a computer and then submit online. All of that stuff there, the records keeping in the FAA is atrocious, and at the PMA too. They're just so far behind.
So you just think that they're flooding, that Boeing is flooding their assembly line with workers that aren't qualified.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's happening in every major airline manufacturer across the board, with the exception of Airbus. But that's just because Airbus hires engineers. Their guys are actual structural engineers. They're actual, aircraft engine engineers. Like an engineer is different than a maintenance tech. You can be a maintenance tech all day long and you know how to do a checklist, you know how to do an inspection, but you don't know anything about the engineering of it and how the stuff works.
So I heard a guy said that there are claims that they would, just to keep up with the assembly process. There were times when these guys would go out and get like scrap, pull scrap metal off of.
Oh yeah. And that happens across. And here's the thing: if you think that doesn't happen across the country, and that's the to the level that it happens, you can do it. There's a company right now that sells scrap bin stuff, and they're the biggest company in the world. And I use them every other week. We have to go to them for a part. But see, what they do is they quality test their parts. So when they when they get an airplane that say, a Lear ran off the end of the runway, just for sake of example, as this has actually happened. Lear runs off the end of the runway. Well, they haven't made this jet in 30 years and discontinued the production of the assembly line in 2010. right? You can't get parts anywhere for it. And the airplane's insured up to $700,000 or something. So the insurance company says, well, if it's to repair, it's only $150,000 or whatever the bill is. Go ahead and repair it. Well, where are you going to get those parts from? You got to go to a boneyard and you got to get them.
Right. But these are brand new. These are
Well,
brand
and
new
so
planes.
and that's what they're doing. And the term scrap bin is loose. A scrap bin for an aircraft manufacturer is something that where they designed an assembly, and the assembly had some type of flaw. The assembly didn't pass somebody's QA, quality assurance inspection, or they didn't like it. They didn't like something about that, so they just put it in a bin. Well, you have technicians that don't, nobody who communicates to each other. Communication in shops, especially when it comes to manufacturers, is bad. I mean, it's just bad. You might have somebody that's at one day you come into work and it's a directive that says, yeah, this bin can be used, make sure things get non-destructive tested and blah, 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 use sparingly. If you need these ABC parts, go ahead and use it. That might be the directive Monday. Tuesday, you come in and there's 5 directives and your lead just decides that he doesn't want to show up, so you don't know that there's a directive. You're not privy to that information, and then they don't want to tell you that information. I see that happen all the time. I see it happen around our shop. I see it happen, in other shops and places I work. It's the more links you add into a chain, especially when it comes to manufacturing. I mean, Elon said it best. The manufacturing of anything is the most complicated process.
Right.
I mean, the design is, you've got computer systems now that can design pretty much everything and can pretty much dynamically test anything, in a 3D simulated environment. They got real good with that technology. So then it's the, how do we put these parts into practice? How do we do that? And how do we streamline the assembly line process? You figure it's also the most expensive part of manufacturing is the actual production of it.
Right.
And you gotta think a lot of those guys are overworked. They're in a very high stress. Deadlines when it comes to airplanes, at least with the 737 Max, they were over budget on 2 Air Force contracts. So you figured that took away some type of capital resource from, the assembly testing, and who knows who knows where they pulled the funds from to who knows who they let off, who they laid off, but a government superpower like Boeing, which is they have become, because of the defense contracts and the industrial complex, just like, you've heard so many people talk about, they have the resources to, get away with anything. I mean, as we're seeing, and I hate to say it, get away with murder, apparently.
Right.
But as far as all the maintenance things and why it's now just coming up, it's just in the news now. That's just the stuff that they're reporting on.
Right.
You can go through the logs on a daily basis and see, all the things that get reported to the FAA, and it's a lot. They're flying airplanes over time. They're flying airplanes over their inspection times, and they can do it and get away with it because they have those minimums and maximum allowances in their SOPs, which is their standard operating procedures for the airlines. That part of flight, those airplanes too, they're on progressive inspection protocols. As long as the airplane goes into the hangar, in theory, they can pencil whip everything. They don't have to do an inspection. And as far as, the hotel key card you hear, well, they found a hotel key card. Yeah, chances are they were probably using it as an inspection tool. They were probably using it as a feeler gauge to feel in between the tolerances between probably 2 pieces of metal. you know. Not great. I mean, you should never do that, obviously, but that's just the type of hiring that they're doing. They hire adversity hires. I hate to say it. I hate to call a spade, but they're hiring. You get the problem is those schools are mostly technical or community colleges, so they have all the federal funding in the world.
Right.
They pump them out in 18 months. In 18 months, they get a job, they get a hiring contract, so they'll go to school with a contract. It says as long as you maintain a 70% in this class, here you go. We're going to let you go out on the shop floor, and we're going to let you, you know, do whatever. Who knows what they're doing? It could be maintenance. It could be the actual assembly of the airplane. I mean, you just could never tell.
Okay, so I'm wondering what do you think I was gonna say, what do you think the cure is to that? What's the fix to that system? More
Third
the
party.
government.
Well, so I mean, the cure to that is to remove the Q&A, take it out of in-house. I mean, just get rid of your Q&A department. Get rid of your Q&A department and outsource it. And have a third party Q&A department.
Right.
I mean, that's always double and triple verify when you do work. I mean, we have to do it. I have a shop lead, and then I have an IA, which IA stands for inspector authorization. So my work goes through 2 layers of scrutiny before it ever gets a signature put on it. And I mean, there's enough cameras around this place to be Fort Knox, and there has to be, because there has to be a way to prove, we did that.
Right. But
So,
you're doing maintenance on people that bring their planes in.
well, so we have a flight school. Our shop actually has their own flight school, so it's mostly the flight school airplanes. Then they have 2 flying clubs, and then we recover wrecked airplanes. And then if the insurance company says, "Yeah, go ahead, fix it," then we'll go ahead and do the insurance fixes on them.
Okay.
Yeah, we also hangar airplanes, and then they have a major component shop. So just like we refurbish, our shop specifically refurbishes thrust reversers for the airlines. So they'll get an airplane that the thrust reverser says it can only have X amount of hours. They'll fly it up to the time that it needs to come off. The maintenance shop will pull it off. They'll crate it up, send it to us. We'll inspect it, refurbish it, send it back to them, and they'll put it back on the airplane with a fresh certification as overhauled.
So this guy, I think his name was John Barnett.
Okay.
So
Yep.
What do you think the he was the whistleblower in this whole thing? What do you think the liability for Boeing was? Like what was their what is their incentive to get like, how bad would it have to be for someone, like for a company like Boeing, some executive at a company like Boeing, to make assuming they don't have somebody on their speed dial, to make a phone call to track somebody down that can make their problem with him, this whistleblower, go away? Like how bad does their problem at the manufacturing plant have to be? Like, they're concerned about $1 billion settlement?
Bad enough to have 2 former inmates sit and talk about it on a podcast, I guess.
Right.
I mean, it has to be pretty bad. I mean, here's the other thing too. Because of how bad revenue is with the airlines, just how they are now. I mean, you're thinking stock, you thinking the loss of revenue, stock, the amount. So, I'm sure that their facilities aren't up to date on a lot of their inspection protocols. I would be curious to know when the last time the FAA did a walkthrough was, and how thorough that walkthrough was.
Right.
I'd be really curious I'd be really curious to know what their non-destructive testing department's like, and I would imagine that they lighten those resources pretty significantly because, overall speaking, Boeing's track record with safety is pretty good. I mean, there are always going to be instances that you can read where something effed up, made a mistake, or pilot error, which is, the majority of airplanes. When you look back through all the accident reports, it's always pilot error. You see it countless and time again. You can read all the instances where, people have died inside of an airplane. You can read all the instances where there's been faulty maintenance and an airplane broke. Something that has an incredibly safe track record. Yeah, somebody didn't put the bolt back in right and, it broke. You figure that airplane, the airplane I'm sitting in right now, it is 5 soda cans thick of aluminum. Okay? If you took 5 soda cans, cut
Right.
5 soda cans apart, laid them on top of each other, that is the only thing separating me from this outside air.
Right.
And some intricate, insulation and other things. But 5 soda cans, it's 30 thousandths of an inch.
Right.
The airline's 50,000. 50 thousandths of an inch, 10 soda cans. That's nothing. I mean, you can see the instances where ground service equipment, they'll nick an airplane. Now it can't fly. It'll be one thing. But you got to figure those airplanes reach an incredible amount of speed. You figure the indicated airspeed might be 300, but at altitude, they might be doing 600-700.
Right. I was gonna say, I watched something the other day where just to get off the ground, these things are going 400 or 500 miles an hour just to get off, on the runway, taking off.
The takeoff speed. So just for for this airplane, this is a Baron, takeoff speed 80. 80's stall speed for most airliners. 90 is a landing and takeoff speed for most heavy jets and lighter commercial aircraft.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a large commercial plane.
Oh yeah, it's about 200 is what they're truing out at.
It?
Yeah, well, so the rotation speed, so you can go through and look at what the V speeds are, and you'll have like a VR or your rotation, or sometimes there's like it'll say V and then it'll have an X. And those are like your never exceed, what you can extend flaps out at, what the maximum speed for the gear is, what the minimum speed the gear has to be. It gives you all that stuff. But yeah, I think they're about 200, and then, but as soon as they start their climb, they're starting to push 300. Depending on fuel load and passenger load and all of that.
It's like 185 miles an hour, and that's while it's still on the runway.
Yep. And then you can see what the.
I guess I was wrong. I thought it was like a couple 200-300 at least. Like it was
that they don't start getting up to that speed at altitude. Most of the time in Class A airspace, your speed restriction is about 280.
Okay.
So
like a 747,
Yeah, well, I mean, they might be. So you figure at altitude, you might be unrestricted, above 25, 30,000. But once you start getting into those airspaces, like around, the airspace, we have a speed restriction around here. If you're, above 12,000 pounds, and the tower, when you come in and you call for a clearance, they'll give you, if you're doing an approach, they'll give you a speed restriction.
And then you're saying when you're up in the air, just traveling between states or city, whatever, and they're traveling at what speed?
425.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, true airspeed versus relative airspeed, versus altitude airspeed, it's all different. Your ground speed versus your airspeed are always going to be different, because you figure you might be going, you might be propelled at a certain, velocity or a certain speed, but then you have other forces that are acting on your aircraft. So, if you have a headwind, you're going to have a lower ground speed than your actual indicated airspeed.
Right.
And they have gauges and stuff to give you what's called a TAS, which is a true airspeed.
Okay.
That video you sent me yesterday, and I watched some of it. they make a mention too about that MCAS system on these airplanes and the systems that the pilots don't know about, which that's another thing with certification with these airplanes. What they did not want to do is Boeing did not want to have to go and add what's called another type certificate. So for airplanes that are above 1,200 pounds or 12,000 pounds, can carry, X number of passengers, a type certificate on your pilot's license is required. So I might be able to fly a Gulfstream G2, right? Because I went and I did the training, I did the simulator time, I did all the oral and the practical, and I passed the test through the manufacturer. So then I fly with the pilot examiner. Pilot examiner says, okay, cool, here you go. You're type rated on a Gulfstream G2. Can I go and get in a Gulfstream G3 and fly it? Well, no, because it's not on my type rating. So what they did is they're like, if we manufacture a system that can, mimic the performance standards of the 777 or 37, whatever the airplane is, but airplanes have submodels. So it's what was it, 780? The max is a 737 max, right? It's a 737.
Yeah.
Okay. So that max is your submodel. So there might be a 737 Alpha, there might be a 737 Bravo, there might be a 737 Charlie. And again, these might not be the real, but they'll have a classification. So like this particular airplane I'm in right now, this is a Baron. This is a B-58 TC, which is the model. Now, there's B-58, a G-58. There's a G-58 TC, a standard G-58. It's all the different trim options that you can get. So when it comes to airliners, the different, subcategories are, okay, was it narrow body, wide body? Does it have Rolls-Royce engines? Does it have GE engines? Does it have, Pratt & Whitney engines? What's the engines? What's the avionics package? And then what's the loadout? So what does the customer have? What's their trim package? For that MCAS system, for there to be the manual override procedures for that is incredibly complicated, which is why it wasn't taught. It was never a thing that they were supposed to have to override, because it was never a system that was supposed to be a standard operating system. It was supposed to be a backup system.
Okay.
Problem is the software, their architecture, they didn't have it designed right. They didn't have, an inhibits a way to inhibit it that was intuitive for the pilots. So that's what that system. The other thing that they made a mention of is that door plug, and that door plug failing. They were using subset hardware. Another thing inside that scrap bin that they talk about is hardware. So hardware that doesn't meet the testing or has gone above the shelf life will go in a scrap bin. There are expiration dates on hardware. There are expiration dates on bolts. There are expiration dates on washers. I mean, there's expiration dates on even grease. Every single thing has, some type of trackability, or it should. The problem is that all that trackability comes, extremely expensive. It's very, very, very expensive to keep it, track it, maintain the records on it, because you got to have a resource, which means you have to have a facility to do that. As far as as a way to rectify this, this has been a thing that mechanics have been screaming about for 15 to 20 years. As technology becomes more readily available, and really as, the older mechanics die off and get out of the industry, and they're not passing that knowledge down.
Right. Yeah, you're losing a huge resource. I mean, I was listening to something the other day where they were just talking about like like plumbers and plumbers and roofers and framers and stuff, where they were saying like the average plumber was tradesman, basically the average tradesman was, 30 years ago was roughly 30 years old, let's say. And
Sure.
now the average is like 45 years old. And so what's happening is young people are not going into the trade. Well, as these older people end up, and think about it, that's a 15-year gap. So as
Mhm.
older people start retiring, then there's this, then it drops dramatically. And now you don't have the same amount of tradesmen. One, you don't have the same knowledge. The new tradesmen don't have nearly as amount of, and they don't have the resource to go ask these guys. And
Oh,
the
sure.
second thing is, once these guys are gone, you lose half the tradesmen, because there's for 15 years, there's a 15-year gap.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, and the airlines feel that because they have a cycle. You know, um, there's and it's little talked about, but generally speaking, if you're gonna do 25 years in the airlines and you're not gonna do any more. You might be 30-year, but your last 10 is in a very, very cushy position where you're not touching a tool, where you're just signing documents.
right.
And that's what everybody wants to work up to, obviously, because that's where you make the good money. The problem is that once those older guys, once they start getting tired, they get crotchety. I don't know one older mechanic that's not, a pill to deal with, and those guys, and the guys that are older mechanics, are the only ones that I'd ever want to learn from, because they're the ones that were around when these things were new. You know, they're the ones that have the old knowledge. I mean, I when I was in aircraft maintenance school, there was a specific tool that we used in our shop at work during the day. This guy that was our teacher could tell you what the tool was, but could not describe how to use it, could not tell you how to check to see if it even worked right. And, it's a precision calibrated instrument. So, I'm asking him, I'm like, well, I use this thing every day. And, I'm actually walking him through, okay, well, this is what this does. This is what that does. This is, how you read it. This is how you check the scale on it. And, for me to have to walk my instructor through that, it's just the quality of the instruction that they're given in these schools is not great,
Right.
And the other thing too is, on an assembly line, airplanes are put together for the majority by hand. Even nowadays, there's not, you know, I think the world has a real sketch view of the way that aircrafts are manufactured. I mean, it's a guy that has a station, and that is his station, and he might put the window in, and that's what he does all day, all day long. He has a specific set of hardware that's on his cart. It's checked out to him. It's controlled and tracked to him. And that's what he does. Likewise, there's a guy that puts the gear on and the flight controls in. They have a guy. Well, if that guy's not great at his job and he goes to train the next person, guess what? The next person they're just
Not
going to
great at his job.
Yeah, not great at his job. And you figure now these assembly lines are getting, to where they're old too, to their cycling point, you know, outdated technologies, outdated hardware, you know, and things become, cost of living around wherever your manufacturing places are. I mean, there's so many moving parts when it comes to aviation. It's just incredible. And, we have a regulatory body that really, the FAA, as far as a regulatory agency, I mean, they're in shambles themselves.
Okay. You're not speaking great for the industry.
Well, I mean,
Like,
I
lots
love
of
the industry. Don't
problems.
get me wrong. Here's the thing: our industry is incredibly safe. Our industry is, but there is an inherent danger in, defying gravity.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
sorry. I mean, it's the greatest way to say there is an inherent danger in it,
Right.
and you take that risk. But generally speaking, you know, you can go to any airport right now and see a Boeing taxiing out, landing, fine.
Right.
Our access to technology and our access to be able to do what we're doing right now, to just be able to document and I mean, you're going to start seeing more of this stuff pop up, especially with things not getting filtered now, on like X and Twitter and I mean, that's where a lot of us in the airline industry, the first place where we get news of like service bulletins coming out, will be on Twitter. Unless we actually have heard about it and there's forum and group chats. I mean, it's a very incredibly powerful tool, but you'll have people that have opinions that have no idea what they're talking about, and they're because they have a following, they're able to say, all of these things, and
Right.
they're able to make people think, oh, aviation's not safe. Aviation's not safe. No, it's incredibly safe. There's a couple bad eggs out there. Yeah. There's a couple of companies out there that can do better. If the cost of entry into aviation, one of those maxes, I think is what, $40 million, 40, $50 million. I mean,
I don't know.
it's incredibly expensive. The airplane I'm sitting in right now, 560 grand for this thing.
Right.
And this is just a little two engine, little propeller, 6-seater, little airplane. You can't go very far. You can't carry very much in it. 560 grand. And do you know how often it flies? Maybe 2 or 3 times a month, maybe. I mean, since I've been here, it's flown once, and that was like last week. So, if the barrier to entry wasn't, financial, and people were able to work, hours that were appropriate, people were able to have proper breaks. People were able to, know their job, actually get on the job trained. If there was different layers of, inspections that could be done and different quality controls, and, the shop floor guys didn't know when inspections were happening, because that's another thing too. There's never a random inspection. They always know that it's coming. Somebody always blabs.
Right.
So they're able to get their ducks in a row ahead of time when, for the 6 months that they've been, building and pumping out airplanes, their ducks haven't been in a row. You
Right.
hear countless stories of that, and the morale with an industry that where your job is on the line and you can be replaced by, a contractor any day, the morale is super low.
2 questions.
Sure.
One is, one of the things that I had heard was that, the upper management at Boeing, because Barnett had put his, as far as I saw on a video, that they were upset that he had put his complaints, he'd put several complaints in writing, and that he had been taken aside and told not that he'd been reprimanded for putting his complaints or about safety procedures in writing. They were like, don't put things like this in writing. Like, come talk to us, let us work it out. And why is that?
So as far as him putting his complaints into writing, so that would go to a third party FAA, like a budsman, somebody that's in charge of going through, especially when it comes to safety complaints. Now, if it was, those safety complaints could have been occupational safety, it could have been, inspection safety, quality assurance, it could have been, just that he didn't like the way that his management structure was, was structured. He just couldn't like the structure. So, but if he made a formal complaint like that and he took it to, I would assume he was thinking, well, all right, I could make an in-house complaint, but it's not going to, nothing's going to be done. I need to go elsewhere. So he probably, did the formal complaint and reported it to the FAA, and then the FAA probably, came down on Boeing and said, and, you know, started their, you know, formal request and said, oh, hey, we heard this. Do you know anything about it? And then, you know, that looks bad, which can ultimately, if it was something that can halt production, you know, if it was a safety concern where somebody wasn't doing an inspection or they were coming in after hours and, you know, not inspecting the airplane, just signing the books, which, you know, there's stories that are documented where that's happened, you know, it can halt production. They, you know, with all their other projects, how over budget they are on their research and development, and then, you know, all of their military contracts, I wouldn't be surprised that, you know, he was reprimanded at all and told, listen, don't make the complaints. You stop or you're going to lose your job, which means I'm going to lose all my pension. I'm going to lose my stock options. I'm going to lose, you know, probably my health insurance, my family, if he's got kids. You know, he's probably
Right.
thinking about all of that stuff.
So you think that's why he retired before he made, like, I can retire. There's nothing you can do. So if he retires, now I retired. Now I can sue them. Now I can
I'd
pursue
want to
them.
know how long that retirement process was from the day that he announced it to the day that he actually signed his retirement paperwork, and if it had fully been processed yet before he decided to come out. The reason why I say that is because, you know, when you retire from a job like that where you're a higher level position, you know, that's not just you know, oh,
Standard.
yeah,
See you
yeah,
later. You're
there's,
signing
yeah, that's
documents
like
that
a
say.
3-month process. You know, it's
You think you're signing? He's signing documents that say he can't sue the company, or he can't, or you know, there's no.
I don't know if it's maybe he can't sue the company, but he can't come out of he probably signing. I- I'd imagine somebody came up to him with an NDA,
Right.
said,
What do you
yeah, you
think?
know, we'll let you retire with full benefits and a full package, but you're going to sign this NDA. And he probably gave him the finger.
Right. What do you, and you were saying you think that, like, it's we were talking about him being found, like, in the trunk of his car. Like, I had
Yeah,
never
I
heard
mean,
that. I've watched several things on that, and
I've
like, I had
seen
never heard
pictures
that.
of that dude. I don't, dude, there's no way first of all, you're not going to kill yourself in your trunk. Okay.
Right.
Your own trunk. I can't even crawl. I'm pretty nimble. I crawl in and out of airplanes all day long. And it's hard for me to get in the trunk of my car. First of all,
Right.
you know, and he was a older, kind of a heavier set guy too. I mean, he didn't look
Right.
like he was a thin, nimble little, you know, wiry guy. So, you know, somebody definitely killed himself. I mean, somebody did
You,
that. That's not
you
a
mean you mean someone killed him, not he?
for
Someone killed
sure.
himself. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and the wording that they use in the suicide note, I think they were saying was kind of off. Wasn't the way that he talked. You
Well,
know,
what's funny is that most suicides, most people that kill themselves don't leave a note.
yeah, and
Like, you know what I'm saying?
well,
That's a
then
myth.
that's the
It's
other
like,
thing.
yeah, because
You
I've
know, I
talked
mean,
to
that's
police
a kid.
officers.
To be honest with you, leaving a note's kid stuff. You know,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
I hate to say the statistic, but kids normally do that because they're looking for attention.
Right, I
You
was gonna
know,
say, I've talked to several police officers, and they've said, like, they've found, you know, matter of fact, I talked to a crime cleanup woman, and she said most of what she's cleaning up, she said tons of it is suicides, and the fact is, she said almost nobody leaves a note. No,
yeah,
almost
yeah. I mean,
nobody.
I think that whole leaving a note thing's a myth. You know,
Um,
is and that's because you leave a note that's premeditated, that's you've got some you know, more mental health, that's got some psychotic, you know, tendency to it too.
well,
um
and but if you're someone who wants there to be no doubt that he took his own life, you leave a note.
oh yeah, 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 well, that
But
nothing
he
that
left the note.
no way to misconstrue it. Yeah,
Right.
which
Okay.
you had to wonder if they did do that, if they sent a wet work team in there, you got to admit that screams, you know, government. I mean, that I hate to say it, but that screams that, you know, somebody that had, you know, stock options and interests, you know, that did not want to see a company go down because they're probably, you know, highly invested into it. You know, all it takes is a phone call and oh hey, he's here.
Um, okay. All
But
right.
yeah, I mean, I would definitely imagine, you know, I would venture to guess that he had, some seriously damning knowledge that could change the course of, whether or not they took the aircraft out of service, if they took another platform out of service, who knows if it's just this one airplane.
And you think that's
You know?
probably what was coming out soon? Like, because
Oh,
they had
yeah.
debriefed him.
Well, and I'm sure that he wasn't done with that debrief either. I'm sure that they had tons of more questions to ask him, and they were probably going to have multiple follow-ups. What weirds me out about the whole situation too is that if you're going to put a whistleblower complaint out there, and you're not a government, you're not somebody like David Grush or, somebody who's out in that in that government space, you'd have to wonder if he's making these claims to the government, why didn't they give him protection? If he's
I
making,
mean, isn't this a civil lawsuit? Isn't this a civil lawsuit between he and Boeing?
I thought that he was making a formal. I thought that he was actually coming out underneath that whistleblower, where underneath that whistleblower thing where it says the government nor the company or whoever you work for can come after you, underneath that new legislation. Because I didn't think that legislation just meant for UFOs and all that.
No. Well, you understand that you understand that the term whistleblower has always been around. Maybe 20 or 30.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
20, 30 years ago, Congress came out with a law that said, hey, if you're a whistleblower in one of these companies, you can recoup a certain amount of money. And they have different variations of how you recoup that money. So I don't necessarily know, I haven't heard anything about, I think they're just calling him a whistleblower, but not that he was actually trying to get money for being a whistleblower. Now,
Right.
I could be wrong. I'm wrong all the time, but I've never once thought he was trying to get money. I thought he was just, being a whistleblower in general or suing them in general.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong. And the other thing
I
is,
mean, you'd have to look at what the grounds of the suit are too. If he's is he saying, okay, well, this company, why would you sue? For personal. I mean, what would your damages be? I mean, what would your punitive
well, maybe
be?
he's suing them because he's saying, hey, I took early retirement and I feel like I was forced out, because he felt like he was forced out, and I'm suing you guys because you forced me out of the company. I'd still be there to this day. I wanted full benefits. I wanted everything. You guys made it was a hostile work environment, and what you're doing is wrong. And one, keep in mind too, if a jury comes in and says, one, you owe this guy $400,000 in lost wages and retirement benefits. He should have gotten full retirement. He should have worked another 3 years. That's one thing. But the other thing is, by the way, Boeing, for bad behavior, we're going to give this guy $4 million or $20 million. We're going to fine you $100 million for bad behavior, or because it sounds to me like you got problems. And if he wins that, then the government takes it seriously, comes in and says, hey, we're going to go through your whole thing. The other thing is this, and I could be completely I could be bullshit. Like I don't even know what the exact situation is. But what I do know is that, just because you go to the government and you give the government information, and even if the government says, well, move forward, and hey, you tell the government, I'm trying to help the government. The truth is, the government may not necessarily feel like you suing Boeing is a benefit to them. Like you're saying, like they may be thinking, bro, this is a company that makes our fighter jets. We're not interested in you blowing the whistle on them or saying like this doesn't. How does this hurt us? Every once in a while, a door blows off, maybe a plane goes down, but it doesn't typically hurt us. Like we're concerned about.
Do you think that there's a possibility that Boeing sat back and weighed the pros and cons on it and said, yeah, we know we fucked up. We don't want to publicly admit it. Let's
make a phone call, get rid of this guy.
Yeah, let's make a phone call. Let's get rid of this guy before, we come underneath scrutiny.
I hate to say that. I hate to think that, but I think it may very well be true.
Well, and here's the thing: if they paid him out, then they have to admit. I mean that's like a no contest.
You can do an out of court settlement where you say, look, we're just going to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We don't talk about this, or there's a gag order. We're going to pay you this money. Now, obviously that doesn't always work, but with a company like Boeing, it probably does, because they'll may just sue you into oblivion. But I think that there's too many. Boeing is a behemoth of a company, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
there's too many instances where large corporations have done just such unsavory have behaved in just horrendous ways.
Oh yeah.
And so do I think that a corporation is beneath having someone taken out? Absolutely not. Like, I don't think that
Oh
that's
no, the thing that they don't have them on speed dial is just not. It's just not correct. It's just not true. There was
what I do. Go ahead. Sorry.
there's a podcast out there, and I'll have to try to find the link for you. But one of the guys that talks to everybody actually talked to an assassin, like
Right.
was an operating assassin. Like the week that they had talked, and I forget who it was. I forget which podcast it was. This was one of the ones that I listen to pretty often. Um, but yeah, to think that's not a thing. I mean, they might have said, "Hey, we can't pay him out because regardless whether or not there's a non-disclosure agreement, it's gonna make us look guilty. You know, we can at least minimize the damage.
Well,
If we
like
just
you
make it
said,
kind of look like
maybe the government was involved. I don't know, but I don't think you necessarily get government protection. I just don't think that's necessarily a thing. You have to apply for that, and he may not have thought he was in danger.
yeah." And that's the other thing too. I mean, I would imagine that he didn't. I'd imagine that he didn't think that anything was going to happen. He was going to make these complaints, and it was going to put his name in the public view for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then he'd just go on about his business. But I mean, if you come out with some seriously damning things enough for them to want to go to those extremes, you got to wonder you got to wonder what the mindset of the person who's back there making that call is. And maybe they're just the psychopath in this scenario, and it's not just the company. It's not the company itself. It's the action of one individual that doesn't want to be tied in with his nonsense.
What is your take on the whole Boeing whistleblower and his sudden demise?
John Barnett. So if you look into him and his whole past, he was an engineer. He worked for Boeing for, decades upon decades. So he retires in 2017. And then he starts making claims that Boeing is cutting corners. It's very unsafe. They're doing a lot of illegal, procedures. So, we all know that the industry, in any industry can be corrupt for, profit. It's always profit over principle. Same thing that's going on here. So he files a lawsuit, and he's basically blowing the whistle on everything that's going on. There has been reports of them lubing parts with dishwashing liquid. There's been reports of using old scrap metal from scrap yards, slapping them on the planes to, reach deadlines, and, letting these things just fly in the air. What's really weird is all these planes start to, fall apart at one time. So within like the last few weeks, we've had over 10, plane incidences, which is really weird. So John was blowing the whistle. He was in the middle of a deposition with them. And turns out that he gets offed, allegedly. So all of a sudden, in the middle of his deposition, he just, said, okay, I'm done. Forget it. I'm going to suicide myself. That doesn't make sense, right? In the grand scheme of things, you're in the middle of this deposition for years. And then all of a sudden, they find you in a parking lot, in a hotel parking lot, in your trunk. So it's like, that doesn't make any sense.
In his trunk?
In his trunk. So he shoots himself and then throws himself in a trunk. How does that work? Or he's in his trunk and then shoots himself? I don't get that. Like, how are we as the public supposed to just accept that? That doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I have not heard about the trunk thing. I thought he was found in the cab of the car. Like, I thought he, shot himself or in the cab in the front of or in his cab of the truck in the parking lot.
Yeah. They said there was reports of him And that's the thing. Like, I think that, early reports were saying that, and then they try to change. They're always trying to change, in the media, like what really happened. But there's been, witnesses saying that. So it just makes no sense. So then all of a sudden, all these planes start falling apart. There's wheels, there's panels, all these things that's happening. And it's very reminiscent. If you look into the octopus murders, this happened, a few decades ago, and there was a similar situation to where it mirrors this very situation. So any kind of, corporate espionage, and you start poking around and all these things that's you're kind of looking at, that doesn't really make sense. And you have, investigative reporting happening. These people turn out dead all of a sudden. So if you look at the octopus murders, it's on Netflix, and it's about a guy named Danny Casolaro. And he looks into a case called Inslaw.
Right.
Inslaw, I don't know if you heard about that. Have you heard about that?
I've watched part of the documentary where it was the Department of Justice I believe was basically ended up bankrupting a company that had created software that made it easier to track cases in the Department of Justice were working on, as opposed to a paper system. And it was like a really revolutionary software that was going to update their entire system, and
Right.
And so suddenly they were able to somehow bankrupt the main company and eventually just kind of steal the software instead of
Correct.
paying them for it.
Correct. So the DOJ, they have a contract with the DOJ, Inslaw. So they're a software company. They have a contract with the DOJ for 3 years. And into the second year, the DOJ stops paying Inslaw for their software. And they end up bankrupting them. They were like, okay, what's going on? Everything was good the first year. What is happening? So they end up, going bankrupt. Inslaw sues the DOJ. They go to court and they actually win. They get a judgment. So then after that, all this, like weird things start happening. Once again, for one, as soon as that federal judge made that judgment, he gets disbarred. He loses his seat, right?
Right. Yeah. I saw that part.
Then they replace the new judge with the former attorney of the DOJ.
Right.
So now he gets in the seat. Once he gets in the seat, he reopens the case. Okay, let's look at this case again because something isn't right. He looks at the case and reverses it. Now Inslaw doesn't get any money at all. Case closed. So it's this whole thing to where, again, the journalism, the investigating journalism is a dangerous field. So Danny looks into it and he's like, this doesn't look right. So he starts looking into the case of Inslaw, and it's a way bigger picture. It's not just that case. It's the software that the DOJ was using has very vital information. And I don't even think Inslaw knew what they had as far as the technology and what it could do. So this is why the DOJ wanted it. So that's why they stole it. So he starts looking into it. And long story short, he's meeting with different sources. He's finding out all these different things. He even tells his brother right before he goes meets this last source, because he was like meeting with people and getting information. He tells his brother, he's like, hey, something happens to me.
It wasn't suicide. Yeah.
It wasn't
an
suicide.
accident.
It wasn't an accident. So he tells his brother like a week before, and then a week later, he's dead. He meets the source at this hotel, and then they find him in a bathtub. So supposedly he slit his wrist and whatnot, but they did a whole forensics thing, and they're just like, that doesn't look right. And it's just weird. And then that's it mirrors this very thing with Boeing.
Did you ever see a movie, and it was based on it was a real case, but the book is like 1,100 pages, so you'll never read it. But Yeah, it's ridiculous. But the movie was great. It actually had John Travolta in it. This is probably back in the 90s, 80s or 90s. It's called Civil Action.
No, I've never seen that.
So there was a chemical company that had a plant, and everybody around the plant was getting sick. So I mean, like, you know, they've got cysts in their organs, and they have ulcers, and they have brain problems with their brain. Like there's just ridiculous types of problems, and it's coming from some type of a toxin, but nobody knows where. And so this lawyer who's had a good run figures out that it's got to be coming from this one company. And so he sues the company, but he's got to prove that they are poisoning the water in that little town.
Right.
And he's got whatever 80 clients or 30 clients, I forget how many clients. And they're they try and settle with him a few times for nothing, you know, just enough to basically pay him back.
Right.
And he's saying, you know, no, because I know that something's going on. Eventually, they end up bankrupting the lawyer. And because, you know, most people don't realize, like, they think, oh, well, your personal injury attorney comes in. Well, if he sends you to a doctor, he's paying for the doctor. If he sends you to a chiropractor, he's paying for the chiropractor. Like, he's putting up all the. That's why he gets 1/3.
Right.
That's why they're selective with the cases, you know, because they're the ones putting up all the money. So, and this lawyer's putting up all the money, and he's paying, you know, he's paying $20,000 for this test, 15 for this one, you know, 40,000 for this, 25,000 to fly this guy in. You know, I mean, it's just it's millions of. He's in the whole millions of dollars. He's took out a mortgage on his house. He's, you know, sold his car. Like, I mean, they get him to a point where they're fighting, and they finally bankrupt him, and then he ends up like literally he's like laying in bed one night or cleaning out of his house or something. I mean, it's just like horrific, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's putting away the boxes because, you know, you have to keep the case for like 7 years. He's putting away boxes for the case, and somehow or another he comes across something like a transcript or something, and he just looks at the transcript, and something kind of clicks, and he jumps in his car and he drives out to where the little town is. And he goes to one of the investigators. I'm sorry, one of the employees that worked there that was interviewed by one of his associates, but not by him. And he realizes, I guess, that a few questions have not been weren't asked.
Right.
Or the way the guy answered them, they seemed evasive. So he goes to the guy and he's like, we were here. I have a couple questions, more questions. The guy's like, yeah, even though the case is just done. And he asked the guy, and the guy happens to ask him the correct question. And the guy says, no, I never dumped anything. I never dumped anything in this ravine. He's like, oh, okay. He goes, where did you dump the chemicals? He goes, oh, I dumped all my stuff over in the such and such, right into the pond.
Oh.
And he's like, okay. He goes, well, we tested this and this, and we found samples. Did you ever put anything over there? No, I never did that. He goes, do you know who did? Oh, yeah, no, that's where Tom used to dump his all the time. He used to dump the chemicals over there. Yeah, but I never did. So it was just like this, because somebody answered or asked the incorrect question.
Yeah, it's all about the right question.
Right. And so he then, of course, takes all of his findings and sends it to the EPA, and they shut down this whole thing. It come to find out that these guys were dumping all over the place. Wow. They just couldn't prove it because they didn't have one dumping ground. They had multiple dumping grounds.
So they weren't looking in the right place.
Correct. And then they would go clean it up. Like, they would go dig it up. You know, they would dig up like the areas and try and clean them up kind of later when they realized that people were getting sick. They kind of tried to cover it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So they were having a hard time finding the dumping grounds, and it didn't make sense where they were finding stuff. And, you know, like if it was dumped here, it wouldn't have gone into this, this reservoir. It would have been this one, and these people are sick, but those people aren't. Like, it didn't make sense.
Right.
So, but the whole thing gets shut down. But it's, you know, then there's like the Aaron Brockovich type thing, you know, where there was a movie made about her, and same type of thing. It was a chemical chemical plant that was poisoning. These things happen. I mean, but and these companies, they desperately try and cover them up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and sometimes there was one about a nuclear power plant. God, this was 40 years ago. This movie came out. I think Meryl Streep was in it, and when she was young, and same thing. She was a whistleblower, and they try and kill her. Like somebody comes up behind her, they like try and knock her off the road. The whole thing.
Yeah, that seems to be a reoccurring thing. Like it seems like they always have some type of hitman or somebody who's coming after these people who are like getting really too close and kind of asking those right questions. So it's even like that whole story kind of reminds me of what happened last year in East Palestine, Ohio, with the train crashes and the toxic materials falling into the whole city and whatnot. Which was really odd about that story is that a year before, a movie called White Noise was depicting that very scenario in East Palestine, Ohio, with a train crash and toxic materials falling into the whole city. Not only that, but they shot that very scene in East Palestine where the crash happened. It mirrors exactly a year before. Yeah, which is insane. So it's like all these like parallels. It's kind of weird, like how like life imitates art and vice versa. So it's always, I always say it's always in movies and in media and music. They always kind of show you what's happening. Like even like the movie Leave the World Behind. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yeah. Or I was gonna say, so in the 40s, whatever, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? Government stance: no UFOs, no UFOs, no UFOs. It's all BS. These sightings are not true. They then go out of their way to kind of not villainize so much, but embarrass or mock any professional that says, listen, I think I saw a UFO. Pilots see them, they don't want to report it, that sort of thing. But then it's constantly in the media. It's in the media, and it's in the and I mean, like, there are series about it, there are movies about it. So after 40 years of inserting it into the how to put this, the social consciousness, then it comes out there. We have got video, the Tic Tac videos, of, hey, we don't really know what these are, and there are other videos, and we do have reports, and we do think that there is something. We're not sure what they are, but now keep in mind, if they had told that or shown those videos in the 1940s or 50s, there would have been mass panic.
Yeah,
mass panic
for sure.
But now,
and being that like we're so desensitized to all these like alien movies and all this other stuff, it's kind of like, oh, okay,
yeah, nope.
What's next?
Everybody paid their mortgage,
right?
Everybody paid their bills,
pay your taxes.
Everybody, exactly. Everybody's like, yeah, I kind of figured that.
Yeah, and that's how they do it. They do it through predictive programming, and they just hammer it, decade after decade with all this stuff.
So when it happens, acceptable. It's acceptable now.
Exactly, and it works. It works beautifully. Like a lot of people don't know that the Pentagon actually has a film fund. So like they worked directly. The government works directly with Hollywood to produce these films and make sure they're depicted. Yeah, propaganda. They're depicted a certain way. Make sure you're not saying this. You're saying this. So it's very real.
So what is your thoughts on this guy, John, whatever his name is,
John Bennett?
Yeah,
John Bennett.
Yeah. What do you think happened, that the right questions were being asked and they sent somebody out there to have a chat with him, or make sure he didn't have a chat anymore?
Exactly. I mean, you just got to look at all the pieces on the puzzle of what's happening, and it's pretty obvious, right? So like, it doesn't make sense when you're spending all this time, all this money, this legal money, getting into court, and you're in the middle of a deposition, and then you just you want to off yourself in the middle of it. So of course
after you've been fighting all these years,
it doesn't make sense. Like why now? You're so close, and you're definitely asking the right questions. So when you're getting that close, I believe myself, personal opinion, that it was foul play. It has to be because you're too close, and that industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So you're reaching some powerful people, and even those powerful people have even more powerful people above them. So whatever the agenda they're trying to serve, or whatever they're trying to protect or hide, they'll do it at all costs just for one guy, just breaking out all this information about him. So I think he was definitely asking the right questions, and he was very close to probably winning. And they had plans otherwise for him.
Did you see there's a video circulating where they were asking Boeing employees, would you fly on one of these planes? And they have like two different employees are like, no, I wouldn't. I don't even fly, to be honest with you. I wouldn't fly, after seeing some of the things that have happened here and that have been done, I wouldn't fly.
Yeah, which is funny because in my part 2 video, so there was a 737 that had major issues, like a whole panel came off. Boeing 737. I get a text message the day before it happens from a friend who worked at Boeing. They don't work there anymore. And I kept them anonymous because they were like, hey, keep it anonymous. But, I just saw your video and I wanted to tell you this. They were working there for about no more than a year.
Right.
And they didn't want to work there anymore. And what happened was they worked in the main plant in Washington. And they told me that they worked in the engineering department in design. And they were saying that, hey, I wouldn't fly any of those planes. That's all you need to know. And not only that, if I didn't have any choice and I had to fly Boeing, I would definitely avoid the 737s. And I put that in my video, screenshotted it, and put it in my video. And then the next day, that came about, and I was like, okay, I got to put this in a video. This is crazy. 737 is the worst of the worst of Boeing. And I know they had problems with the 777s and everything else, but they said that, hey, if you have no choice, if you're flying Boeing, not fly the 737s.
Shoot, I was going to say, well, I was thinking about the supposed suicide, and I was thinking about that movie Shooter. Did you ever see the movie Shooter?
I did with Mark Wahlberg, right?
Yeah, but they have the FBI agent plays in it, and they've actually got a contraption that they put on your neck and your arm that allows them to crank your hand like this while you're holding the gun. Like there's nothing you remember they're cranking it up, and he's like, let's put the gun to his head, and
that was insane.
Yeah, it was actually the guy that plays the FBI, not Wahlberg. Wahlberg, of course, ends up saving him. But yeah, because I always think to myself, like, how does that work? But this way they get the peppering of the gunpowder correct. They get like that's like the perfect scenario. It's like
it is
like you did shoot yourself because you did.
Right.
You had there's no bruising. There's no it's a perfect device.
That's insane. Yeah, and that makes you think that if they have that in movies, like what else do they have that they're not showing us? So like if they have those mechanisms to where it looks like you're shooting yourself, and it's an accident or a suicide, it's like, okay, so what else do they have? Like I even looked into something they had that they declassified back in the 70s, and it was a gun that wasn't a traditional gun. It was called a heart attack gun, and it shoots a dart and it hits you and it dissolves. So it doesn't look like anything hit you or whatever, but then it causes cardiac arrest. So it makes it look like you had a heart attack. And they had this back in the 70s, and they declassified it in the 70s. So who knows how long they had it.
Right. Well, and I wonder if I always wonder, like, what poisons do they have, now that they could poison someone and it just wouldn't show up.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that movie Outbreak, right? Going back to the movies. I don't know if you've seen that 90s movie Outbreak where they had all these different strands of like Ebola and H1N1 and bird flu and like all these like every disease and virus you can think of, they have it in a lab just whenever they need it, they can release it, or, they use it for, bioweapons, whatever the case may be. But it's like, you guys have all this stuff. So it makes you wonder, like, yeah, what are they cooking up to use for their advantage?
Right.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think that, again, everything they put in the movies is very true. And it may be, 5, 10, 20 years behind. So they're comfortable enough to releasing that older information because they're like, okay, we could put that in the movie and make some money off of it. And, what we have now is way more advanced.
Well, like I say, truth is stranger than fiction, right?
It is. It is. All the stuff that's been happening lately in the past, I would say 4 years alone. I mean, it sounds like a movie in itself. And it's like, who would have thought the whole world would just stop, right? All of a sudden, nothing's happening, no work, no school, no nothing. And the whole world just stops because of this virus. So that's, yeah, it's wild to think about. And all the things have transpired since then.
So what do you think the result is? Like, I mean, of the whole Boeing thing, like what do you think the next shoe drops? What is it?
Personally, I think that, we are stronger together as a collective. So I think that when people are starting to not fly Boeing or, really raise questions and start to, either petition and, do whatever they got to do to take the money out of the corporations, that's where, you'll see change. Same thing with Kellogg's, how a lot of people are boycotting Kellogg's right now. People are boycotting it because the CEO said, you should eat cereal for dinner because it's cheaper and it makes sense for, lower income families. Like, he really said this.
Right.
So people were outraged. They're like, I'm not eating cereal for dinner. Like, what are you talking about? So everybody starts boycotting. It's all over TikTok. People start boycotting. Then what happens is the market had to react and, their pockets start hurting. So guess what? Now they're selling Lucky Charms. You buy 2, you get 3 for free now.
Okay.
So that shows you, right? So like, and for them to do that, they had no choice because people aren't buying their product. So I think the same thing with Boeing has to happen to where, people aren't flying, people are, raising those right questions and taking the baton from where, Bennett left off and then just running with it. Because I mean, we use these planes every day. I travel, you travel, everybody travels, right? So this is very serious. We have to be very serious about our lives. And I'm not getting on any planes that's falling apart. And, that, how is that? Because there's nothing you can do. You're on the plane, starts falling apart, mechanic issues and all this other stuff. It's like, what can you do? So we have to get really serious about these corporations and how they're treating us and moving forward with that. So I think that's
right. So I was wondering what I meant was, like, what do you think happens? Like, is there an investigation? Do you think they can track it back to Boeing, or you think it just dies?
it's hard to say, right? So like, where do we go from here? Who picks it up? Where do we go from here? I mean, if you're making a documentary about it, people can raise questions. Social awareness is always good. So if people are looking into it and asking those right questions, then something can be done. Otherwise, it does die. We can't, just let it be, because that's very suspicious, right? So this is why I do my videos, because it's like, we have to ask these questions. We have to see what's really going on. And if I can spark somebody, their mind and be like, okay, well, maybe I'll do something about it. And sometimes I'll take, matters in my own hands And it takes a village, it takes a community. So I think one individual person can't do so, but collectively we can.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can't
That's
imagine.
that's the best thing we can do, because like think about it. These corporations have billions of dollars. They have tons of resources. They want to snuff something out, they can. The media is in bed with them. Obviously, it's all about profit over principle.
So
So
they're and let's face it, they have tons of money. They can get the best people. So nothing's going to point back to Boeing. It would take another series of whistleblowers to put it all together and say, hey, this is what happened. I was in the meeting. I have the emails. I have a recording that they called
Right.
this black ops group that does this for us. It costs X amount. They watched the guy for 4 days, got him into a position where they knew he would be alone. They grabbed him in his truck, whatever. They did
Yeah.
whatever. That's
Yeah.
probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that with that type of mountain to climb, a lot of people they'll see the mountain and just be like, I can't take this on, at least not by themselves.
Right.
It'll take somebody who's really trying to make a change, and then gather the troops from there. So that's what it really takes. But one person can't take him down, because you saw what happened to John. So like, and allegedly, but I think that personally, I think there was foul play. So it's going to take more than one person. Boeing, I think that I mean, that in itself is just it's a still developing story. So I think we'll hear more. I don't think it's the end of it. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I guess we'll see.
I had watched a video where they talked about just before he had been at a plant. He'd worked at a plant where there were no issues. Like, it was a really well-oiled machine, right? And I guess he got bored being there or something. I forget what their issue was. So they transferred him to another plant. And the new plant, he walked around for like a day or two and was being shown around, and that he had complained, saying that the violations he had seen were just, outrageous. And that at that plant, I believe he'd written like a memo saying, look, here are issues with the plant, with how with your quality control procedures. Here are problems with that I'm seeing employees are on drugs. I'm seeing, like, he pointed out a bunch of stuff, and he was apparently reprimanded, where they were saying, look, like, don't put that in writing. Don't put stuff like that in writing. Like, come to me, talk to me, whatever. Then he was moved, I think, to another plant where he wasn't happy there either. He said it was just as bad, if not worse, than the first plant. And that's when he retired. That's what I had heard. That's when he basically said, okay, well, I'm gonna retire. I'm taking, whatever, early retirement, or regardless, like, after he left the company, that's when he filed the lawsuit.
Right.
So, you were saying that he was saying these things afterwards, but I heard he had started the process of making complaints with quality control procedures while he was at the company, and they were giving him a hard time while he was at the company. And that was part of the reason he left.
Yeah, it was gradual. It was gradual. And
Right.
then after he left, then he filed the actual lawsuit. But yeah, it was gradual to where he was seeing things that he didn't agree with, and like the procedures and protocols, like the whole system was broken. And yeah, he didn't like it. And then he just left, and then he actually did something about it. I think we should definitely do this again. I got a lot of stories. I got a lot of stuff that's pretty interesting and juicy on all this kind of stuff. Investigative journalism and whatnot, conspiracies, if you want to call them that.
Well,
So
I mean, yeah, it's like, because I don't know, everybody that looks into, I mean, I call lots of things conspiracies. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, or that it's, a lot. What's so funny is that most of the conspiracies that I grew up with are now just the way it is.
right,
Like, that's just what happened. Like,
yeah. They said the difference between the truth and the conspiracy is about 6 to 12 months.
yeah.
So, or it could be a couple years, but either or.
There was. Do you know what the shoot? You ever heard of the? I want to say it was the Ford Pinto.
Ford Pinto. Do I know of that car?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So they made them for a few years, right? And then it was built so that it was super cheap and it got good gas mileage.
Mhm.
And then they were having accidents where people were, if you basically hit one from the behind, they were blowing up.
Oh,
And
really?
that was one of the problems, was like if it got hit from behind, it blew up and it caught fire.
Mm.
So multiple, and I may not have this exactly right because they made a movie about it, but they didn't use the Ford Pinto. It was just a vehicle.
Mm.
They made it generic. Obviously Ford's pretty big. You don't want to mention the Ford Pinto, and so they just had kind of a generic kind of company and what was happening, but it was based off this case, and essentially what the case was, that this guy goes and he sues Ford because there's so many of these cases where these vehicles are blowing up, and they continually. And so what Ford would do is there would be a case and they would immediately go to the surviving family members, and they would settle with them very quickly before they even thought they had a case. And so what eventually happens is this guy's looking at them and looking at them, and multiple attorneys have tried to get involved, but their experts would go out and they would look at it and they'd be like, I just don't, I've tested these things over and over. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars testing this vehicle, and we just can't figure out why they're blowing up.
Right.
And so during the process of suing them, they basically just overwhelm this guy with paperwork. Like every request he makes, they don't say, oh, we don't have that, or we don't. They just throw so much paperwork at him. He can't keep up. And he's a little time lawyer. He can't, he can't read. You deposit 60 boxes at his law firm.
That's there's no way getting through that.
This is hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of legal hours to read this, and I can't do. And I don't have the time. So
Right.
So
when is this, like the 70s, 80s?
Yes, he's outmatched.
Yeah.
Comes to find out that there was a switch that was located near the gas tank, and they had replaced the gas, and Ford knew about the problem. They knew that if the car was struck from behind, the gas tank could be punctured and gasoline would hit this one switch or whatever it is. And that if you had your blinker on, there's little sparks going. And
damn.
boom. So it would blow up.
You're in a matchbox.
Right. Or if you kept your there were several things that would do it. So when they were trying to they were trying to get it to do it over and over again, they couldn't get the sequence correct. But Ford knew it was an issue. And the way they figured it out was they contacted someone in the accounting department, an actuary. And the actuary had done a study showing what would be more expensive: a total recall of all these vehicles where we have to fix the gas tank, or paying X amount of lawsuits. And they determined that it was cheaper to pay off the lawsuits than it would be for the recall.
Of course. That's all the product. That's everything.
Right. Despite the fact that you're going to be setting people on fire.
Right.
Like that wasn't even a consideration. It was just dollars and cents.
Right.
And what ends up happening in that the lawsuit is, of course, they get found. It comes out. I don't think it ever got to an actual verdict. I think they just came and they gave them a massive settlement or something along those lines. It was just outrageous. I'd have to look it up. I'm sure I botched the whole thing, but it was something like that, where it was an actuary that they just had, because they basically destroyed all the evidence. They didn't give them anything that could help them, and they didn't have enough money to have this to prove that this was happening and how it was happening. So they're thinking they were trying to get it thrown out altogether, but they just happened to get the actuary who had done the calculation, and they happened to find this guy, and he was like, they're like, did you do a study? And he was like, I did do a study. What was the study on? And he was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so now and you let this happen. So it was a massive.
That's insane. Wow. Yeah, it like I said, it's profits over principle. It's always that companies. They're like you said, it's dollars and cents. Hey, should we just keep killing people and just settle? Cheaper to do that, or yeah, let's do a recall. Nah, the recall is gonna be too much. Let's just settle.
Well,
That's how they see it.
It's funny. It's like sometimes you think you hear about these things where like this product was $120, but if they use this product, or let's say this part is whatever $120, but this part is $102. Now the second one isn't as good. It's a little bit lighter, so it actually saves us a little bit, and it's a little not as durable. It's made out of a hard plastic instead of aluminum. But so the one product is $18 cheaper. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody would make that decision. Yeah, but if you need, 10,000 of these, that $18 is a huge savings to the company. So they make that decision. You think, well, why would they do that? It's only $18. Yeah, but it wasn't $18. It was ended up saving them, whatever, $1 million, 1.8 million, or whatever, 180, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever that number comes to, you're like, oh, okay, wow, now it seems like, wow, that's a huge savings.
Right.
But in the end, that product wasn't as good, and it ends up, you hope that it costs them a lot more than that.
Right.
Because that's the only way they would learn.
Yeah. And yeah, in the end it doesn't, and they're going to keep doing it. So I think that with this whole Boeing thing, they rather just take the heat and be like, okay, allegedly, let's, take care of this guy and we'll deal with the consequences.
Well, and keep in mind too, I mean, right now it is a conspiracy. They can continue to say we had nothing. Like, there's no proof. This is these whack jobs on the internet. Right. It's just these are conspiracy nuts. The guy was depressed. He killed himself. That has nothing to do with us. There's no proof. And eventually, that's what they get to keep falling back on. Well, then if we did it, then why isn't there proof of it? Why didn't somebody see it? Why isn't there recording? Why isn't that? Why, where are these people? Like, why isn't there an investigation? The police clearly don't think that there's anything foul play going on. They gave us a clean bill of health. How come the death certificate says suicide?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So very quickly they can fall back on that as long as there's nobody comes forward that's credible.
Yeah. And that's, they're counting on that. They want somebody to be like, even if there's another person coming forward and be like, hey, I'm going to pick up where he left off. Okay, we'll be ready for it. Right. But when it's like a whole mass movement, then we'll start to see some change. But like when you're falling back on, oh, it's a conspiracy, and then they'll just hope it dies down. The next story takes the news cycle, and then they just move forward. That's what they're banking on.
Well, I was going to say, eliminating one disgruntled loudmouth employee is easy, but getting rid of 40 guys that have proof,
that's dangerous, right?
Yeah, you can't do it now.
You can't do that.
Right now, what are we going to do? We can't go around whacking everybody.
Right, exactly. So if it's like you said, 30, 40, 50 people at a time, now what? Now we have a problem on our hands. So that's what it takes. And I think that if he had rallied the troops a bit more, then he would have had some serious firepower.
Harvey Weinstein had a good run up until multiple women came forward.
Bingo.
And then, he was able to quash one at a time, but when suddenly there's 12 of them, it's like, damn it.
And they're all doing interviews. They're all saying the same thing. It's kind of like, well, I can't put all these fires out. Now what? Okay, now they have to address it. Now they have to put him behind bars. That's how it goes.
Yeah, he was able to quash them when they were coming out one at a time. But he I bet he thought he had it.
And his whole play was, okay, they're gonna do this and that, but I'll give them a career. So maybe they'll stay quiet a little bit longer, because they want their careers to take off. So that's the carrot he was dangling.
Yeah. Did you ever see that video of him talking to that one woman? There's a she video recorded him when she was pitching him on some product she was trying to get, and it's so disturbing.
No, I don't think, I don't know if I've seen that
Oh
one.
my God, bro. He's so like, you want to meet later? I like your nails. Like it was so, I forget exactly what he was saying, but
Yeah.
it was so,
Yeah, I haven't seen that
so
one.
creepy, bro. It was so
I'm
bad.
sure. I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. So like, yeah, I'm sure it's pretty disturbing. Even the stuff that's coming out with P Diddy and all this other stuff, like this whole industry is starting to crumble
Yeah.
because you know one by one people are coming forward and saying stuff. So that's what's happening.
Hey, if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Please share the video. And also, please consider joining my Patreon. Thank you very much. See ya.